participants. It's so nice to have all of you here this evening for this very casual, informal readers get together. And I'll just tell you in brief about how it all happened in the year 2017, when a few of us, Professor Prem, Professor Rashida, and myself, we thought of sharing whatever we read and then building up a beautiful group of like-minded literary souls who could share whatever they read that particular day or that particular week, and then growing together in this literary arena. And that's how it happened in the year 2017. And ever since, we've been having weekly debates, discussions, where you might ask, right? It all happened over a little WhatsApp group that we have. It's called Readers Rendezvous. And every week we used to have debates, discussions, book reviews, even prizes were given for book competitions by Winnerman Publications. And so it was a very interactive exercise. We had people from cutting across frontiers from all walks of life, having with us, having them with us. It was an engaging, interactive exercise, I should say. And today is the first time we are coming online for literary souls like us, away from the fever and the fret that John Keats tells us in the Ode to the Nightingale. And this place is a very comfortable place of relaxation. No certificates, no feedback sheets, no timing here for us. Just relaxing over a Friday evening cup of coffee or chai or green tea or whatever you call it, and then relax. So participants, we request you to kindly mute your audio and video once a presenter presents their paper or review. After that, maybe you could enable the audio and you can ask your questions, right? It's a very informal exercise, so stay cool, stay connected. Without much ado, let me hand over the session to Dr. Benet, Vice Principal, Associate Professor of English, a dynamic literary soul. Over to Dr. Benet. He's going to give us a review of Orhan Pamuk's wonderful book, Istanbul, Memories and the City. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rufus. We'll start without much ado. I'm very happy to join this Readers Rendezvous. This is my first meeting. I think I'm not all that techno savvy. In the past, I never joined you. Now I regret. I don't use WhatsApp for that matter, and I'm not all that active in Facebook, so you can understand. But in recent times, circumstances have forced me to become a digital migrant. Okay. And I have joined you digital natives. Okay. So I'm very happy. And today I'll share with you some of those important things related to this book. This is titled Istanbul, Memories and the City. This is by Orhan Pamuk. This book I did read some 10 or 12 years ago. Then recently I saw a piece of news which said that Hagia Sophia has again become a mosque. Right. This is an important landmark in the city, Hagia Sophia, or Church of Saint Sophia as it's called. It remained a mosque for nearly 500 years. Then it became a museum. Now it has become a mosque. But before that, it remained a church for nearly 900 years. So perhaps this is the only city which can boast of many such landmarks. And Hagia Sophia is one such landmark. So it was the capital of the Byzantine Empire. What we call Istanbul today was known as Constantinople for nearly 900 years. Then in the year 1453, Constantinople fell to the invading Turks, and since then it has been called Istanbul. And it has a very rich history, very long history. And when I read this, I came across many interesting things about the city. And this is the city where you can find the dividing line between Asia and Europe runs. Actually, this dividing line is only an imaginary line, and there is a strait called Bosphorus, which connects the Sea of Marmara and the Black Sea that separates the city. That is the dividing line. So literally, this city is a meeting point for the east and the west. So very important city. And in a memoir of this kind, you find the life story of a person, that is the author himself, Orhan Pamuk. As you know, he was a Nobel Prize winner in literature in the year 2006. He's not an ordinary writer, but he writes in Turkish, then his works get translated. I'm very fond of this author because he's a very powerful writer and a very great memoirist. We call someone who writes a memoir a memoirist, and this is different from a biography or autobiography. So I'm not going into what autobiography means or biography means. I'll confine myself to the book, Memories and the City. So when he talks about his childhood memory, he says it is all in black and white. It's a beautiful book, and it has nearly some 40 black and white photographs, and it reads like a history book. Then again, it reads like a autobiography. Then again, it reads like a journalist's account of the city. Then again, it reads like a curator's account of a city, someone who takes care of a museum and he discusses all those museum pieces. A very powerful writer, Orhan Pamuk. And in this book, this was published in the year 2005, when the author was hardly 50 years. And somewhere in the book, he says, this is about my childhood. Something like the 1960s, 1950s and the 1960s, he talks about. And as you all know, at the end of the First World War, the Ottoman Empire was dismembered. When the Treaty of Versailles was signed in the year 1919, after which what followed was armistice years. We call it armistice at the end of the war. And the Ottoman Sultanate itself was abolished in 1922. It was a city of ruins. And for so many years, people came to live with a sort of melancholy. So it was the detritus of an empire he talks about. Say, a memoirist, when you read a memoir, a memoirist is always suspected of concocting events, or the work is charged of fragmented lies. Say, a memoirist faces many charges, but a memoirist, remember, he is under what we call moral obligation to tell the truth, and that too to tell the truth objectively. And Orhan Pamuk does it. I'm not going into every chapter in this book, but it makes an interesting read, especially the chapter on the poets who lived in the city. He talks about 4 20th century poets. I'll read out the names for you. These were very popular poets. One is Abdul Haq. He was a memoirist. He wrote about Bosphorus civilization, a very important book. Another person was Yahya Kamal, a poet. Then the third person is Tanpinar, the novelist. Ahmed Hamdi Tanpinar, the novelist. Then the fourth person is Rasad Ikram Kochu. He was an encyclopedist. Now, why does he refer to these 4 writers? He says the city itself is under the grip of what he calls huzun. Huzun means melancholy, an empire that was in its ruins. So he calls the city a melancholy of ruins. And remember, when 1453, when Constantinople was destroyed, and when the Ottoman Empire was established by Mahmud the Conqueror, the next 500 years or so, it had a long, illustrious history. It was the world's longest lasting empire, the Ottoman Empire. And from Constantinople to the borders of India and almost to Central Asia and what we call Middle East, including Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, they were all under the control of the Ottoman Turks. Now, after 1919, everything had collapsed. So, this kind of huzun or melancholy had taken over the people. So, he talks about all the beautiful buildings that were in ruins, the old hammams which the Pashas occupied, and all those beautiful palaces, mosques, and churches. He gives a vivid description of every important landscape in the city, especially Hagia Sophia and Sulaimani Mosque. And there were other places, for example, something like the Golden Horn. That is, Golden Horn is near the place near the Bosphorus is called Golden Horn. And the beautiful, magnificent bridge above that, it is called Galata Bridge. Then there are so many places in and around. As you read the book, this is a kind of a tour where the writer takes you through all the lanes and bylanes of the city. So why should we read a book like this? You know, as you read the book, you come across many pieces of information about the visitors who had come in the past, like Gaucher from France, and even Baudelaire, who had visited the city, Nerval, and all those people who came with a lot of curiosity to the city to learn about the city, which was once the capital of the Byzantine Empire, now the capital of Ottoman Turks. So the city itself has a very rich history. Right? When a memoirist writes history, he takes into account his own life story and also the story of the place where he lives, the story of the people who are his neighbors. It's not an individual story. So when he writes a story of this kind, it becomes imperative on the part of the writer to refer to the political situation, the socio-cultural practices, and above all, the times, what we call the social energy of that particular time. See, for instance, William Hazlitt, he says, the spirit of the age. The spirit of the age can be found in the, can be experienced only by the writer and the people who live in that particular time. So it's all a combination of the lived experiences. And it is not relying on memory alone. The writer goes a step ahead and he collects information from many sources and he presents them. See, this book is full of photographs, many photographs, a good number of photographs. They're all black and white photographs of the city and the many places, and most of the places were in ruins in the 1960s. So it had become an Islamic republic. This is a photograph of the writer who bends down to look at Bosphorus that connects the Sea of Marmara and Black Sea. And there are such interesting photographs. So accompanied by photographs and other literary documents and newspaper accounts, he presents a memoir, a very powerful memoir. I'd like to say a few things related to the life in Constantinople or Istanbul. For instance, he talks about a particular place called Beirut, where a lot of Greek Orthodox Christians live. So he calls this city a multilingual city, a multicultural city. But after 1930s, what happened was a Turkification. They called it Turkification. So they encouraged people to talk the Turkic language. On the streets of Constantinople or Istanbul, you could hear English, you could hear French, you could hear Spanish, and you could hear Arabic, and you could hear most of the languages of Europe and in Middle East. Now, in the 1960s, there was a resurgence, a nationalist resurgence. He talks about that, but he doesn't wander into religion. In fact, he focuses our attention on some of these old buildings which had stood nearly for 300 years or 400 years. Especially, he talks about the yalis, O-A-L-I-S, yalis, which are nothing but what we call wooden houses. And he makes an interesting account of all the ships that passed through Bosphorus, and including the accidents that took place. For instance, in the year 1991, a ship went down with 22,000 goats and sheep. Then, in the year 1963, there was a loud explosion on board of a Russian carrier. Then there was an accident in 1966 where two ships collided in the Bosphorus. As a result, most of these houses were burned down. It was a small waterway, so you could understand when huge ships pass through this Bosphorus, which runs through the center of the city. Many such interesting things that he shares with us. And we need to read the story in order to understand why a writer tries to present the truths about the city objectively, and how he has to resort to sincerity and authenticity when he presents the facts before the audience. And in order to understand the history of the city, and in order to understand the history of Europe, we have to read this book. And above all, he says something about lots and lots of things about his own family as well. For instance, he talks about his family being secular for a long time. He claims his grandmother never prayed, his grandfather never prayed, they never had praying mats, I mean the Islamic praying mats. But that was one day, that was Ramadan, they were happily waiting for without even fasting, because that was a day of feasting for them. So many interesting things about their family. And remember, this is a cleft country. Cleft country means something that is caught between the East and the West, the Eastern civilization and the Western civilization. For a long time, many of these Turkish rulers, they tried to impose, especially after 1922, what we call modernization on Turkish people. Especially it all began with Mustafa Kemal Pasha, who is called Ataturk. In fact, he banned women wearing scarf and parda, and he banned men wearing the fez cap or the skull cap. So, and he put Turkey on the road of secularization. Many things. So, in a memoir, you find a nation's history told, or rather, a nation's history told in a parallel manner along with someone's life history. And also, it covers so many things. With this, I will stop. You have to read the book in order to understand. But as a writer, a memoirist, he has to overcome his innate prejudices. And you don't see any prejudice on his part. And you have to sidestep all radical judgments. So when I say you have to sidestep your radical judgments, you don't pass judgment on any group of people or anything. And for which you have to appreciate the author. And again, the eye for random events and chance occurrences. So when I say random events and chance occurrences, whatever catches the fancy and the imagination of the writer, they are told with utmost sincerity and authenticity. I recommend the book to you so that you can understand why, again, Turkey is in the news, and again why Hagia Sophia, which has been converted into a mosque, is in news. You read the book, you will understand. A beautiful book, and the picture that is shown here is the mosque, that is Hagia Sophia, which has become a mosque now, and it's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful story. If you really want to understand, we need to understand cultures. We need to understand civilizations. We need to understand people who live in certain parts of the world. And this is the right kind of book I would recommend for you. So kindly read this book. So, and you will certainly enjoy the pictures as well as the content, because it's written in a very lucid and a very a language that is filled with huzun. Huzun means melancholy. And the pages of the book, in fact, he makes a reference to Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. He makes a reference to Claude Lévi-Strauss, who calls that mysterious year. The mysterious year is the melancholic atmosphere, and how it embraces the entire population, the entire city. And that is a beautiful narration. And how people regret, and how they come to terms with their poverty, how they come to terms with their newfound secularism. All these are told beautifully. I recommend this book. It's a nice book to read. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Dr. Benet, for hooking us on into a different world altogether, the world of Orhan Pamuk and the melancholic past that he envisages, the first Nobel laureate from Turkey. And beautifully, you have also showed us the book, the pictures in it, the painter in Pamuk, and how he engages us in this journey with authenticity in this narrative. Questions. Participants, if you have any questions, you can unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and you may ask questions to Dr. Benet. So I have a question for you. Yeah. Do you think, because, today with this rapid stride and surge in memory studies, Astrid Earle has written cultural memory studies, a whole lot of focus is given for memory studies today. Do you think memory is or can be biased? Or do you think memory can be relied upon? Because 10 years back, if I had bought a bike for myself, I might not know the day or the color. Or 20 years back, if I had bought a bike, I might not necessarily recollect the color or the model of the bike. But so, do you think memory can be relied upon when they write from memory, or do you think a little bit of these embellishments happen when it comes to such memoirs?
Okay, so that's a good question. Let me respond like this. Say, there is something called distant memory and near memory. So distant memory, okay, you have come a long way in your life, you have reached your 50th year or 60th year, and you try to recollect what happened when you are a 5-year-old. Very difficult to recollect. Or what happened when you are a 10-year-old, very difficult to recollect. That's a distant memory. But remember, memory is very powerful. See, I still remember when I was in standard 5, what happened in standard 5. But I don't remember what happened some 20 days ago. It becomes very difficult to recollect. So our mind records things which our mind was impressed by. See, that's why lived experiences. These are called life stories, lived experiences. So lived experiences means it's experiential knowledge. In other words, it's experiential knowledge. And it is very difficult to forget what we call experiential knowledge. Number one, because you are a witness to something, you have a first-hand experience, and something that had left a long-lasting impression on your mind. Well, say, even all those things you cannot share in a memoir. For example, what we call domestic privacies, which you cannot share in a memoir. You may be tempted to share certain things in your autobiography or in a biography, but you may not share such things in a memoir. A memoir is something between an autobiography and a history book. So here, You are right. It may be your jottings in a diary which you rely on, or it may be a photograph that may trigger your memory, or it may be a video for the modern day learners or writers. So anything that could trigger your memory. For example, I have a few books on my shelf which I immediately refer to. In some of the books, I know when I bought certain books. Okay, so every time I pull that book out, I know right the day and how it happened, or who gifted me this book, or who presented me with this book. Okay, things come flooding back to my memory, and um, it is not that same. I think it is someone who says how things are housed in our mind. I like the metaphor of home for your mind. Things are housed. House means, see, even in old age, as people say, memory becomes your emotional crutches on which you lean on. Right? You think about your past. See, even there is a joke. How do you know someone is old? If someone talks about future, he is young. If someone talks about the past all the time, that means he or she has become old, right? So memories, of course, the places change, right, and the times change, but within our mind, there are plenty of traces, as Derrida says. When you learn something, when you experience something, they leave memory traces, and these traces can be recollected even after a long time. But as you have rightly pointed out, there is some kind of an embellishment, people say, or exaggeration, it could be. That is why a writer has to take this particular stand that I have to tell the truth. To borrow a term from Plato, you have to be a parrhesiaste. A parrhesiaste is someone who is determined to tell the truth even at the point of death, right? So I think this term has been used by Derrida somewhere, and this is applicable for most of the memoirists, because when people read this text, they know they are reading a slice of someone's personal life and also a slice from history. So, and that is why, you know, in modern times we talk about testimony literature, memory literature, and so on. We accept whatever people say as testimony to be sincere and to be authentic and to be absolutely genuine. So we have to believe, at some point we have to believe the writer instead of questioning him. And unless we have a counter information or some information to counter his truth claims, the writer's truth claims. So a memoir, I think we have to introduce memoir studies in our schools and colleges so that we can understand history better.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Benet, for this wonderful answer. Any other questions from the participants? You can unmute yourself and ask.
Hi, I had a question. So this is a translation of the original Turkish memoir. So how do you think the duty of the translator changes from you know, like when you're translating a memoir as opposed to a work of outright fiction? Like,
I get your point. See, this has been translated by one Morrie, and it's she who has translated. And in one of the interviews, Orhan Pamuk has claimed, my translators take much of the income that I get. Almost 60% goes to my translator. That's what his complaint was. But remember, the translator's duty is to convey the sense, the essence. Okay. So it may not be a word-to-word translation or things like that. But a translator succeeds in conveying the essence, or what we call sense translation. I think most of these writers, they resort to sense translation. I have a feeling when it comes to poetry, only people run into a lot of difficulties when it comes to translation. Whereas when you have to translate a historical text or a, what we call a micro history book like this, you don't run into any serious problem when it comes to translation. So you are able to capture the essence of the sense. But I like the quotes from some of the writers from Turkey, and most of them have been faithfully translated. I think fidelity to translation is very important, and we have to trust the translator as well.
Thank you, Dr. Benet.
Yeah. See, that's how Gabriel, one second, I'll finish, just 20 seconds. See, when you read Gabriel Garcia Marquez or when you read Leo Tolstoy, Tolstoy wrote in Russian, it was translated into English. That's how his works came to us. Today, someone is going to read poems by Pablo Neruda, who in fact wrote in, I think, in Spanish or Portuguese, who wrote, he was essentially from South America. So we have to trust the translators. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Benet. Any other questions? Now, thank you, sir, for that wonderful presentation you hooked us on.
Me?
Yes, yes.
This is Joseph Dureraj. Dr. Benet, it was a very good review. My hearty congratulations.
I never knew you are there, sir.
No, Dr. Rufus invited me just to honor his invitation. I am here, but anyway, I'm happy to meet you online and listen to this book review. Anyway, I'm tempted to read this book. I have not read this book, but I am tempted to read this book. Okay, to follow up Dr. Preethi's question, no, he has written lots of books, the same translator or different translators for different books.
Okay, just hold on. I will pull out a few books. I have a whole lot of Orhan Pamuk with me. I'm really fond of him. Okay, this is A Strangeness in My Mind, another book by Orhan Pamuk. Let me see. Let me see who the translator is. This has a different translator. His name is Ekin Okla, a different translator. So it's not Morrie freely. This is a different translator. This is A Strangeness in My Mind. Another book by Orhan Pamuk I have is The Silent House. This is also by Orhan Pamuk. And this is by Robert Finn, another translator, Robert Finn.
Okay.
So I have two more books downstairs. One is Snow, and another one is My Name is Red. Thank you, sir. I have never really paid attention to the translators. Thank you. There are different translators.
Since there was a question on translation, I became a little curious, and that's the reason why I raised this question. But it was a good review. And particularly the way you talked about the distant memory and the near memory with good examples, I thought that was an insightful discussion from you. Thank you, Dr. Benet, and thank you, Dr. Rufus.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Now we'll go to Dr. Maria Preethi Srinivasan, Professor and Head, Department of English, Queen Mary's College. Preethi ma'am, over to you.
Yeah. Good evening, friends. Delighted to be here with you. And it's just a happy coincidence that I also have a life writing, and I'm presenting Muhammad Ali's The Greatest. And before that, I would like to read a poem. And there again, I see kind of serendipity. I chose a poem, not realizing that it would connect with my book review. So this poem, which I have written, is titled Explosion Contained. It's just 4 lines. Explosion Contained. I wish I could put my body through the motions of an explosion. If you can't bear to see me dismembered, do appreciate what it takes to stay together. With that, I'll move on to sharing my notes on Muhammad Ali's I'm the Greatest. I prefer the term life writings, and because it is all encompassing that way, it includes edited life writings, it includes biographies, and we won't go into that. And I've always looked at life writings, autobiographies, which you call life writings, through a lens, and that lens is the power of expression. Because for me, and for many of us, if we have reflected on it, the power of expression is so therapeutic. So if you're mapping the journey of the oppressed from silence to the voiced position, from voicelessness to people who are able to voice their expression, and to think that there are so many stories that go unheard because they have been untold. The fact that a story of an African American in the 60s in America, a boxing legend, is told, presupposes that there has been empowerment in his life, and a kind of empowerment that has helped him express himself, not just through this autobiography. Yes, his primary mode of self-expression is his sport, boxing. And well, we might be quite amused by his assertion of being the greatest. And many of us are familiar with that song, Black Superman, where he says he floats like a butterfly, stings like a bee, and he says, my face is pretty, you don't see a scar. Well, actually, that's where this idea of him having a pretty face is there in the beginning of the narrative. And why I'm mentioning it is because I see that as one of the shaping influences in his life. His mother always told him that he had a pretty face, that, you know, at times when a child would fall or have an injury, mother would be so concerned as to see that his face did not get a scar, because she always felt that he had a pretty face, and that was sort of reiterated in the conversations in the family. And regarding his training in boxing, again, you see that from his childhood, he loved horses. He loved the physique of the horses. He loved their muscularity. He loved their, you know, trim bodies, you know, absolutely free of flab. So that inspired him to train hard in boxing. His father was an artist. His father painted signboards and also painted for churches. Well, and we all know that Muhammad Ali was originally Cassius Clay. So he denounced his Christian religion. He denounced the surname Clay. And the reason for that is his teacher in school told him that he had a name that he should have, a surname that he should be proud of and he should live up to. And then he did a bit of research, and he found that this person named Clay had said very atrocious things, very patronizing statements about the superiority of the white race and the inferiority of the Black peoples, and how the achievements in civilization have been primarily by white people. And they are the builders of human society, as it were. It is on their labor and hard work that that human society has developed. In this connection, he also felt that all the names that they had, you know, names like Clay or Drew or something, which are obviously Western names, have, and given the fact that they have been transported as slaves, their ancestors have been transported to America to build American society. So along the way, they have lost their Muslim, Islamic, or African identity. And the names that they have got are obviously, the surnames that they've got are names of the men who, you know, violated their women. So he sees himself very much as a product of miscegenation taking place somewhere along the line. So having done a bit of research, he thinks that he comes to the point of deciding that this name doesn't suit him. And down the line, of course, he's influenced by the Back to Africa movement and the nation of Islam founded by Prophet Elijah Muhammad. And we know that even Malcolm X was influenced by that, and Malcolm X embraced Islam. Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali had a very strong friendship going. One of the highlights of his life and his life story is the winning of the Olympic gold medal. And you know what he did with that medal? He threw that medal into the river Ohio. Why did he do that? Why did he throw that medal into the river? So it goes back to his feeling so empowered and so high about his being a champion. And he goes into a hotel where they refuse to serve him. And his buddy, Ronnie, who is with him, says, why don't you contact all your sponsors and let them know that this is how you're being treated? And meanwhile, even Ali tells the waitress, I'm Ali, the Olympic champion. So she takes that word back to the man behind the counter and he says, so what? So this experience of humiliation goes so deep into him. And even when he goes to the telephone booth and tries to contact all his sponsors, there's no response. He thinks at that moment, he thinks of standing up and giving a big speech about racism and how the country has not come far, and even with the abolitionist movements and civil rights movements or whatever, but he's just tongue-tied. So at that point of time, he just, after that humiliating incident, he just goes and stands over on the bridge that is over the river of Ohio, and he drops his medal into that. And I'd just like to read a small excerpt from that experience. The Olympic medal had been the most precious thing that had ever come to me. I worshipped it. It was proof of performance, status, a symbol of belonging, of being a part of a team, a country, a world. It was my way of letting them know that although I had not won scholastic victories, there was something inside me capable of victory. How could I explain to Ronnie I wanted something that meant more than that, something that I was proud of? And then another passage about throwing the medal. He says, so what I remember most of the summer of 1960 is not the hero welcome, the celebrations, the police chief, the mayor, the governor, or even the 10 Louisville millionaires, but that night when I stood on the Jefferson County Bridge and threw my Olympic gold medal down the bottom of the Ohio River. It had taken 6 years of blood, blows, pain, sweat, struggle, 1,000 rounds in the rings and gym to win that medal, a prize I had dreamed of holding since I was a child. But now I had thrown it in the river and I felt no pain, no regret, only relief and a new strength. As I told you, I've been looking at this book through a certain lens, the lens of how he expressed himself, how he dealt with the trauma of racism, and why did he choose boxing? Okay, so he realized that he couldn't be an artist like his father, and somewhere down the line, his father told him that he would be a boxer, that he could be a great boxer, and that was his inspiration. And he really worked very, very hard at being a boxer. Now, the thing about Ali is that he's also a poet. He tends to compose lines. So all those lines that you have in the song, floats like a butterfly, stings like a bee, are all slogans that come from Ali, and he challenges his opponent. So when he returned from Rome after winning the Olympic gold, he says, how Cassius took Rome, that's the title of the poem. To make America the greatest is my goal. So I beat the Russian and I beat the Pole. And for the USA, won the medal of gold. Italians said, you're greater than the Cassius of old. We like your name, we like your game. So make Rome your home if you will. I said I appreciate kind hospitality, but the USA is my country still, because they're waiting to welcome me in Louisville. Feats of, then there's another poem that he has written, Feats of Clay. Feats, it all started 20 years past. The greatest of them all was born at last. The very first words from his Louisville lips, I'm pretty as a picture and there's no one I can't whip. Then he said in a voice that sounded rough, I'm strong as an ox and twice as tough. The name of this champion, I might as well say, no other one than the greatest, Cassius Clay. He predicts the round in which he's gonna win, and that's why his career has been. He knocks them all out in the round he'll fall, and that's why he's called the greatest of them all. Well, in this poem, he talks about predicting. And he says this is one of the strategies that he followed. He would predict that his opponent would fall in the fourth knock, or he would fall in the eighth knock, and that would exactly happen. And his promoters started betting on that. Okay, so these fights for which he was engaged and millions of dollars were made were because he could predict, and his win was as per his prediction. So he was really a game which attracted large crowds. Okay, his performance attracted large crowds. Such a sensation he was. And why boxing is another question that I had in mind. Well, obviously it brings to mind the dealing with frustration and expressing, pent up feelings of anger about racism and things like that. Because even in Aboriginal writing, I have seen that the young people take to boxing. Okay, so using a punching bag and practicing away at a punching bag helps them to vent out anger and frustration. But I wouldn't like it to be looked at only through that lens as a means of venting frustration. As I said on another occasion, boxing is like jazz. So if you look at the movements in the ring, it's so poetic, right? The dodge and punch movements are very much like a jazz performance. So if you play a piece of jazz music, okay, so especially the wind instruments, and you watch a boxing performance, it seems to sync so well. But sadly, it had these overturns of bloodthirstiness in it. So even though when he was engaged by his sponsors for a fight, it was like black versus white, and it was good versus bad. And this is from one of his sponsors, McDonald. He tells him to renounce Islam, all right? And he refuses, okay? So there's a lot of pressure on Ali to come back to return to Christianity. Well, why did Ali embrace Islam? Because as you might have thought, because even with regard to the abolition of slavery, the Quakers did a lot, okay? And there were white humanitarians who worked for the abolition of slavery. Then you know about William Wilberforce way back, who worked on that law in England towards the abolition of slavery. So for him, he terms all those interventions by white society as white hope. Okay, so what he doesn't want in his life is the answers to white hope, because even the teacher in his school telling him to live up to the name of Clay was very patronizing, right? So this kind of reaching out to the downtrodden black man, being patronizing, rescuing them, and that idea of that in that kind of intervention he did not approve of, or he did not take to. Instead, he wanted the assertion of Black identity, assertion of wrongs, the wrongs in history, the fact that they were brought from Africa. So, and that is why that assertion that they originally belonged to Africa and that their original faith was Islam, and they did not want this redemptive strategies or redemptive interventions of Christianity. So when MacDonald, his promoter, tells him to renounce Islam, he brings in that metaphor of, you know, good versus bad, good versus evil, right versus wrong. And he tells him in very clear terms, the fight is about good versus bad. So I'll just read a small excerpt. You came, sir, if you can keep a tab on the time, I'll be grateful.
Yes, 2 more minutes, 2 more minutes.
Oh my. You
Yes.
came in as a fresh breeze in boxing. You were flamboyant, yes, colorful, cocky, and confident. You know how Morton Sharnick, the Sports Illustrated editor, described you after you won the Olympics. He said you were the real all-American boy. Okay? And then he goes on to say, you know, he points to Liston, his opponent, and he says, he's the thug, the menace, the monster. You would be like Little Red Riding Hood, and he would be the wolf. That would be a good money fight. But as a Black Muslim, they pray for the wolf to win, and they'll stay that way. That would wreck my promotion. So I'd like to conclude by saying that probably, you know, this good versus bad obsession can be seen even in the Islamophobia that is there in America, and that is sort of standing in the way of acceptance of Islamic people in different parts of the Western world. Well, this is another humorous incident. Just 1 minute, sir. So Burton, he spoke up against enlisting in Vietnam, all right? And his protest got the attention of Bertrand Russell, and Bertrand Russell made a phone call to him and appreciated him, and he didn't know who Bertrand Russell was. And he said, okay, you sound sensible. You know, he says, you seem to be better than you look, or something, some kind of adverse remark he made. And Bertrand Russell came for his performance in London. So then he wrote, when he knew that, he looked up Bertrand Russell, he knew that this man's a great mathematician, and he wrote a letter of apology to him. So, he received a very nice letter from Bertrand Russell, where he says, I have read your letter with greatest admiration and personal respect. In the coming months, there's no doubt that the men who rule Washington will try to damage you in every way to open to them. But I'm sure that you know that you spoke for your people and for the oppressed everywhere in the courageous defiance of American power. They will try to break you because you are a symbol of a force they are unable to destroy, namely the aroused consciousness of a whole people determined no longer to be butchered and debased with fear and oppression. You have my wholehearted support. Call me when you come to England. Yours sincerely, Bertrand Russell. So thank you. And I also want to say that he was, you know, very fond of Langston Hughes. So he wrote poetry, he read poetry, and so there were kind of two languages on which he operated. One was the written medium of poetry, and the other language he chose was boxing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Maria Preethi Srinivasan, for enlightening us into the beautiful world of Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, and the various vistas into his life and what made him the angst that he had. And now, open for questions. Participants, you can unmute yourself and then introduce yourself and ask questions to Dr. Preethi Srinivasan.
Hi, Dr. Preethi Srinivasan. I'm Dr. Sauli Mary from Kerala. I'm working at St. Xavier's College. Ma'am, it was a really good review on that particular book. I got a very nice idea about, in-depth idea about this particular book, and your idea of relating jazz to boxing. That was new to me. Thank you for that. And my question is, I cannot say it as a question, it is only a kind of like contemplation of mine. This is not particularly to this particular text, but to all the books that come under other literature. When you think about the hegemonic, when you think about the canonical literature, we always say that there is a kind of misrepresentation of black folk, black or the colored. There is always a misrepresentation of the black or the colored. So do you think that, and this particular book is a life writing, it's a biography, and it is autobiography, and it is actually very subjective in nature. So do you think that there is a kind of misrepresentation of the white folk in this particular text? When you speak about yourself, are there any chances of misrepresenting the other lot? For these people, the others are the whites.
I may not be able to answer it in terms of the affirmative, but he does work very consciously on working on clearing misrepresentations of himself. And he says he begins his narrative clearing all the wrong ideas that were put in the press about him, the wrong ideas. And he says that all this misinformation was the strategy of white society. So they put out the story that he came from a wealthy family, but the truth was that he came from a poor family. So like that, he often kind of brings up all the instances, and then he also talks about how he and Joe Frazier were pitted against each other, two blacks pitted against each other, and they wanted to watch that fight. All right. So the whole narrative is very much about the powers in society and how they pit white against black and black against black. You know, that also happens. So these are strategies.
Thank you, Dr. Saumi, for that question, and thank you, Dr. Preethi Srinivasan, for answering the question. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, hi. My name is Bhuvaneshwari. I'm from the Mother Teresa Women's University in Kodaikanal. So hello, hi. I'm a student, sorry. Also, my question was, like, since we were talking about memory earlier, and Muhammad Ali, now we know, has been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. He is like, well, people know him as having the disease. He's sort of like the face of the disease itself. And we know that dementia is a significant component of the disease. And what is the role of disease in mediating memory? And so like, this is not like particular to the text itself, but when we talk about memory and what is truth, and like, if somebody is misremembering things because of dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that, like, can we even say that it is not the truth or not factual because you know, it is caused by
how reliable is the narrative?
Yeah, how reliable? Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, you know, there's a portion in the book where he says that his performance has been from 1960 to 70, and he felt that he was slowing down. Okay, and he talks and he says very clearly that the fight is not the fight that you're able to put up as a boxer calls more on your mental capacities than your physical. And he felt that he had pushed the limits. He had pushed the limits. The other day, Dr. Rufus and I were talking about a pianist who dropped dead at the piano because there was so much music in him, more music than his body could take. And the adrenaline rush or whatever, we don't know what it is. He just had this heart attack, and he was, reaching this crescendo in his performance. And there he was, So I do feel that those sports is about fitness. when you push it beyond limits of, push the boundaries to perform well, you are probably slowing down or doing some disservice to your physique and your mind. So answering that question about dementia, I do surmise that all that he went through, and when you read his story, it's so tragic, so moving, and it's all about fighting society, fighting all the forces that are against you, fighting, trying to prove yourself, trying to deal with the rejection of the past. And there is so much overloading that is taken place within the human being, within the human psyche, that I don't say there's been much room for healing in his mind. That he did find that kind of nirvana or that kind of transcendence in his boxing. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, he kept the fight going. That was his basic psychology.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Dr. Preethi, this is Benet.
Yes,
but don't you think he kept on telling himself, I am the greatest? That was a very powerful auto-suggestion, right?
Yes.
When he claimed that I am the greatest, and he was trying to make himself mentally fit, and he had to repeatedly tell himself, or he had to goad himself into fighting. So he had the mindset of a Roman gladiator, because it was all blood sport, as we know, and people just treated him like an animal, as you said, in all this blood sport. Okay, so I think his mental courage or strength he gained by suggesting to himself that he was the greatest on earth.
It could also be seen as a facade behind which he hid himself. Because there are times when he says, I was afraid.
Okay, that's true.
And he also says that all this, he found that he had this intuition for prediction, and that put tremendous stress on him, because he would predict when his opponent would fall and the game would go that way. Okay.
That's true.
And he had that probably somewhere back in his mind. It was a, yin and yang sort of working together. The fear of the prediction not coming true, the assertion that the prediction would come true, and he had to keep himself on that orbit,
There was always this pressure to perform, right? That was always there, especially when he had this encounters with the Joe Frazier, and I think only twice he was knocked out only twice in his entire career as a boxer.
Yes.
My memory serves me right. So anyway, that was a wonderful presentation on Muhammad Ali, and I like this because comparison with the jazz. If you happen to listen to Louis Armstrong, it is called a hot jazz. And the entire trumpeting and the entire music, it tells you about victory. So the jazz itself, especially the trombophone and all those saxophone, loud, blaring, and the music, the kind of music.
Thank you, Benet sir. Dr. Maria, yes, sir. Please.
Dr. Preethi, I would like to make two observations. First time I'm listening to you, I'm quite impressed. Your book review was good. It was a balanced review, so that's the reason why I like your review. And the choice of the book is great, because today we hear the strident voice of Black Lives Matter. So against that backdrop, it is nice that you chose to review a book by an African American. So the context, the backdrop, I think that is great. And the episode involving Bertrand Russell, I think that was very interesting. So on the whole, it was a good review. So my thanks and congratulations to you. And thanks to Dr. Rufus as well.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that wonderful observation. Now, over to Dr. Anjana Nair for her presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Rufus. Good evening, each and every one of you. It feels great to be among such literary enthusiasts. Now, coming back to India from Turkey and America, I would like to say a few words before I go on to my review. What I intend to do is to relish a piece of work for its aesthetic beauty and not an academic exercise. This is just and observations of an ardent reader over a cup of coffee. I have selected Rebirth by Jahnavi Barua. I bought this book from a Madras literary festival, and what inspired me to pick up this book was to I was not familiar with a Northeastern writer. It was a comparatively unexplored terrain for me. So I had to Google search who she was, who the author was, and I got a very brief biographical sketch of her. She's not a prolific writer. She has only 3 works to her credit. All the 3 were critically acclaimed books. The first was a collection of short stories, which was published in 2008. And this particular book that I have selected, Rebirth, it was published in 2010. And the next book, which came recently in 2020, that is Undertow. And this book has been shortlisted for Man Asian Literary Prize 2011 and the Commonwealth Book Prize 2012. What I'm planning to do is to tell you the story in a nutshell, and then I'll give you my inputs, my observations about it, of course, without using any kind of theoretical framework. So I should say this is a perfect book one can read over a cup of coffee. No violent twists and turns, no melodrama, no emotional extremities, very calm and composed in language as well as tone. The storyline of this book is a kind of stereotypical, a very cliched and overwritten one. Nothing much outstanding. The protagonist is an Assamese girl, Kaveri, her name. She is being replanted to the metropolitan city of Bangalore after her marriage with an IT professional. She's a very quiet, docile lady. And of course, as the cliche thing goes, she has an unfaithful and abusive husband. And she has let others take decisions for her, a very placid, patient kind of person. And as the story opens, we see her that she's been there in Bangalore for the last 7 years. And as it progresses, we find her a transformed person. She emerges as a person, as an individual who knows her own strength. And this predictable conclusion makes it a bit cliched one, the usual stuff. So I can say that it is a women's journey into personhood. But what makes this so special, or is the narrative voice, the treatment the author gives to this cliche theme. It has an unusual narrative premise. So when the story opens, we find Kaveri as a lady with 4 months pregnancy. So the entire story unfolds in a monologue that this mother-to-be is having with her unborn child. And hence it has to be contained within the span of a few months. The tone is very subdued, calm, and composed. The movement is very slow and is devoid of any violent action. And even when she's talking about the most dramatic and most violent incidents in her life, she speaks in a very calm and composed tone. The density of the incidents we later come to know through the repercussions it had in her life. And through these intermittent nostalgic musings, the author weaves up the entire life of Kaveri before and after marriage. So it is a deeply introspective novel. It is a perfect example of how to best use the first person narrative voice. Just as Kaveri is cool and calm, collected, she is a very kind of introvert kind of person. This monologue too is also has a very calm and composed tone, just like the smooth flow of a river. So one reason is that she's not talking to us, but she's talking to the newborn, yet to be born child of hers. So one is not likely to yell or scream at a newborn. And we get to know about other characters also through this narration. She talks about her she had a very close soulmate back in Assam, Joya. She was killed in a bomb blast. And Barua gives the political history of Assam in patches and glimpses, not direct references, only oblique mention is made. So there are significant plots, characters, things, flora and fauna, which contributes to the transformation of Kaveri from a vulnerable wife to someone who knows her own individuality. This slow transformation of her empowerment is garnered through harnessing synergies of various objects around her. The sight, the sound, the smell, even the memory of the lush green homeland gives her a solace and a comfort. So I should say that she takes nature wherever she goes within herself. So what attracted me most is the omnipresence of nature throughout the novel, right from the cover of it. This is a novel. We have one girl giving a slight glance at a bunch of flowers here. And the very first page itself, the writer sets the tone. I should read it. Sometimes, when I miss the open skies of my childhood, I would step out of the flat, locking it carefully behind me, and run up the stairs to the terrace where I was surrounded by the sky. Still, it was never as blue as I remembered. And I was left with an ache in my stomach as I leaned against the law wall. So it sets the tone of the novel. She's so much enthralled with all the natural objects around her. And as the story progresses, she goes on a boat ride with one of her friends and along with her friend's autistic son to the Kabini River. Here also she recalls her visit to the Kaziranga Wildlife Sanctuary, and she refers this to her baby in her womb, and she speaks. This is from page number 58. I'm cold with excitement, and they spot a tiger when they were on the boat ride. I'm cold with excitement, trembling. Can you feel it, darling? There is a tiger. The boat is silent. No one talks. We are imprisoned in our own thoughts. A tiger always seems to have this effect on people. Robes one of our speech. It cuts us down to size, in a way, reminding us of our largely insignificant place on the immense stage of nature. So, as the story moves on, again, in her lonely days, in the more lonely, cold flat in Bangalore, she tells about a jacaranda tree that is outside her flat. And these lines foreshadows the emergence of herself into a splendid individual. So that is from page number 81. We can pick up these kinds of lines all through the novel. Jacaranda is bare now, no feathery leaves to close its nakedness. Without its green cover, it looks ugly. It does not possess a particularly appealing shape, but soon it will grow resplendent, confident, a different being entirely. So while recalling her days in Assam, she invariably refers to the sparkling waters of Brahmaputra. This has a tremendous impact on the psyche of the protagonist. And she talks to us in page number 109. Joya and I trudged up the winding road to the top of that hill, not for the temple, but for the view from the top. It had a majestic view of Brahmaputra as it looped in a lazy curve from east to west. There was a stillness in that spot that held me in thrall. It is only a superficial solution, I know, being physically removed from situations and objects and people that spark of distress. But however superficial, that small wedge of time and space allowed me to recollect all the fragmented parts of me. And although I could not put it all together perfectly, I still came down the hill in better shape than when I walked up it. So it had the influence of the serene, cool waters of Brahmaputra. She refers on and off throughout the novel. And another occasion, she talks about a car journey along the banks of Brahmaputra in page number 185. I still cannot tear my eyes away from the river, In the morning sun, it sparkles furiously, so bright it is almost painful. We climb highest to the car in first gear now. Soon on my left, wherever there is a break in cover, I catch sight of the river. He teases me, playing hide and seek, vanishing behind the hillside, and then appearing laughing a few meters later. So, as the story progresses, as she emerges, so she realizes her own individuality, while in this monologue, interacting in her monologue to her unborn child. Towards the fag, it's a very short novel, around 203 pages, and towards the fag and into to page number 202, again the jacaranda plant resurfaces. She says, the jacaranda outside the window begins to bloom a week later. A few tentative trumpet blooms are peeping through the leaves, but soon the tree will erupt in a lavender cloud. So what I have felt is that this kind of sight, sound, smells work as tropes, triggering the transformation of the protagonist. So this is a disarmingly honest representation of the distressing predicaments of contemporary urban life, bringing forth the enduring and redemptive powers of love, friendship, nature, or self-renewal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anjana Nair. Dr. Anjana Nair is head of the Department of English, NSS College, Pandalam, Pathanamthitta district, a very passionate literary soul. So happy that you gave us an introduction to a wonderful new book that honestly I never have ever heard of. And it celebrates the aura of the region. And when I keyed in some information about Jahnavi Barua, I come to know that she's also a medical doctor, right? And she skipped her profession, did a course in creative writing, and she's doing writing full time, like Esterin Kire, another writer from Nagaland. So happy that you introduced this wonderful writer to us, ma'am. Any questions from the participants? You can unmute yourself and ask a question. Ma'am, I have a question for you. Dr. Anjana?
I can hear you.
Yes, yes. Sigmund Freud says talking sometimes becomes therapy, or he calls it the talking cure. Now here you find the main character. She talks in solitude to her unborn child, something very interesting. So do you think, in times like these, during this quarantine times when we encounter solitude almost every other day, do you think talking or writing could be a cure the way she found it? Or, what's your opinion on that?
That's a brilliant observation. Actually, I would like to connect this question with the title of the book, that is Rebirth. Here, towards the end of the book, the protagonist is being born along with her unborn child. That too, through the conversations that she has with this baby in the womb. And when we find her, she's 7. She has been there in Bangalore for the last 7 years, but she hardly had any friends there. And that is another reason for that. She, as I said, she had a soulmate way back in Assam who was killed in a bomb blast, and she was reluctant to have any kind of close relationship with anyone. So she didn't have any friends there, and she had a very abusive husband who left her for another lady, and she was all in flat. And then she found out that she's pregnant, and she started talking to the baby, and she got someone who listens to her. And as psychoanalysis says that the primary function of a counselor is to listen. So we hardly find anyone who listens to us without being judgmental. Now she finds someone who listens to her. She shares her dreams, her fears, her aspirations, her everything with this child, and she slowly emerges empowered. And this talking definitely has a therapeutic function to it, especially in a time like this when the entire world is reeling under this pandemic and we're forced to confine within the confines of our homes. We hardly get anyone to talk to, we hardly get anyone to listen to. That is the reason I think we're here talking to each other.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anjana. That was a very insightful reply. Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Online, this is Subbu from Mana College, Madurai.
Okay, sir.
Madam, what is the message the writer wants to convey to the society through this novel?
Sir, can you repeat it? It's not clear.
What is the message the writer wants to convey to the society through this novel?
Okay, okay. The message. I think every woman has a potential within herself. She has to identify it. And no one will come to help you to get the empowerment yourself. You have to find it yourself. I think that if you have anything else, you can add to that.
That's right.
No, it's very complex. It's very complex. It's very complex to understand the character because you have nostalgic feelings and you have no. It's very difficult to understand the character like this in the modern scenario. So that's what I asked this question. What is the message that you wanted to convey to the society?
Okay.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Subbu sir, for that wonderful question. Yes, wonderful observation. And like ma'am rightly said, it comes from within. She should find her enlightenment from within. No, outside inspiration. She has to find it from within. Thank you, sir, and thank you, ma'am. Any other questions for ma'am?
Hello, sir. This is Sharon, and this is Sharon from Lady Do College, and I greatly enjoyed Anjana ma'am's presentation and review. I would like to ask her a question, if that's okay.
Yes, you can, Sharon. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. So when you were talking about this book, I was thinking about Virginia Woolf and like all those feminist writings where women tried to speak about demystifying motherhood. And I find that in a lot of Indian literature, we still cling to those old tropes of motherhood. And wouldn't you like to see a change, ma'am, in the way that motherhood is perceived by Indian authors? Because not everyone would have a maternal instinct. And I don't find that being discussed in Indian literature, or I might be wrong. So I would like your comments on that.
Yeah.
You mean to say that motherhood has been stereotyped in Indian literature? Are there any deviations? Yes, good question.
Yeah, very good observation. Actually, maybe that is the reason that keeps this book apart, because here the author finds motherhood as empowering and not debilitating her. It gives her strength. It gives her aspirations to move forward.
Right.
Yeah, it helps her to identify herself, the creative ability, her own individuality. So here it empowers her motherhood.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Anjana. Thank you,
ma'am.
Professor Sharon, for this wonderful question and the brilliant answer. Now we'll move on to Professor Christina Dhanasekaran, Assistant Professor, Madras Christian College. Over to Dr. Krishna Dhanasekaran.
Thank you, Professor. Hello.
Yes, you can proceed, Professor.
All right. Very good evening to all the other speakers, my lovely people, and evening to all participants. So I'm here to share the joy of Pablo Neruda, and I'm going to be reading some of his poems from his collection, 20 love poems and a song of despair. So I think there's too much of despair in this world. We'll leave that one out, and concentrate on the love for now. I would like to begin quote. If you ask me what my poetry is, I'd have to say I don't know. But if you ask my poetry, she'll tell you who I am. And this is none other than Pablo Neruda. So Ricardes was growing up in a small town of Pamuk and started scribbling verses at the age of 30. And he was reprimanded by his father for working on like poetry. But today we know Pablo Neruda as the famous politician, diplomat, senator, and all the other protest-related and revolution-related activities that he had indulged in. But I think the 17-year-old's imagination and the publication of his poem in the year, this particular collection in 1924, of a 19-year-old, 4 years short of a century. So 1924 was when this was first published. And here we are in 2020, still quite enthralled by the magic of the Pablo Neruda. So Ricardo, who started scribbling verses at his father, Pablo Neruda, as the famous politician, the particular collection of 20 love poems, is that he was able to talk about love and lust in a way that could sort of capture the nation's mindset, the geography and the topography of the place. So he comes from Chile, from South America, which is basically a really long, elongated strip of land. Very different from the other regions of South America that we are used to know and the other cultural stereotypes that we could have about it. So Chile, in the beginning, especially the turn of the century, the beginning of 20th century was very much influenced by the French culture. And 3 poets were the stalwarts at the turn of this century. One was Gabriela Mistral, and the other was César Huidobro. Now, César Huidobro took a lot of French influences and brought it to the landscape. And this landscape was already troubled with a lot of Incan conquest, Spanish conquest, and trying to establish itself as a republic, and torn apart between a lot of leftist sentiments and rightist and right-wing and socialist governments and other things. So this was the very a sort of turmoil and a sort of a culturally, at the same time, politically conflict-ridden place, which was the context for Pablo Neruda to start writing. So what he gave here is, through his personal experiences, he was somehow able to give the people a language, love, that was so earthy and which was so rooted to the ground. Like the women that he talked about are the native Chilean women, not some ideal woman that you write sonnets about and other things. So these are women like you would find in Paul Gauguin's paintings, the French Polynesian women, like robust women, strong women, and women who don't have the very traditional so-called beautiful physique and size 0 and things like that. These are voluptuous, happy, strong, and healthy-looking women. And these women have a sort of a rustic innocence that he's able to bring out through his personal encounter with love. So out of these 20 love poems, I've chosen 6 to read for this evening. And what I've done is I've chosen those poems which talk about the different stages that he goes through, from the sort of surge of love that he realizes in the beginning to, as it would happen in any passionate relationship, goes down to the spiral. But also the different stages of the day, like starting with the morning time and the context associated with that. And what I want you to notice here is not just the way in which he speaks the language of love, because I'm sure love is something that we keep talking about, and it's a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. And without love, the world wouldn't exist. So there are all different kinds of love. Now here, when we talk about romantic love, personal love, lustful love, but the way in which he is able to imagine the body of the woman as that of the body of Chile itself, like the very landscape. It's not just some eco-poetical connection he makes there, but he's able to bring out the very fiery, feisty nature of the earth. He talks about the pine trees. He talks about the beautiful shore, and a sort of a nautical language that he is entwined with. The telluric landscapes of Chile is what is brought out here. So let me read 2 poems where it begins with a surge of love. So that is the 3rd and the 4th poem in the collection. So I'll read the 3rd one first. Our vastness of pines. So this is about the pine trees. And just like notice the lovely imagery that goes on. Our vastness of pines, murmur of waves breaking, slow play of lights, solitary bell, twilight falling in your eyes, toy doll, earth shell, in whom the earth sings. In you the rivers sing, and my soul flees in them, as you desire, and you send it where you will. Aim my robe on your bow of hope, and in a frenzy I will free my flock of arrows. On all sides I see your waste of fog, and your silence hunts down my afflicted hours. My kisses anchor, and my moist desire nests in you with your arms of transparent stone. Ah, your mysterious voice, that love tolls and darkens in the resonant and dying evening. Thus, in deep hours, I have seen over the fields the years of wheat tolling in the mouth of the wind. Now, I think the very first reading, if it wasn't part of a love poem collection, we would all be wondering what exactly is the poet talking about. There's so much about the landscape that he talks about here. So you can see how he talks about the wonderful morning and then the lazy afternoon and waning into the evening, and comparing the love that he receives from the woman, a native woman with all her innocence and her mysteriousness, that he's so filled with the surges of it, like the bellowing of the sea itself that's right in front of him. He goes on, continues in the fourth poem. The morning is full. The morning is full of storm in the heat of summer. The clouds travel like white handkerchiefs of goodbye. The wind traveling, waving them in its hands. The numberless heart of the wind beating above our loving silence, orchestral and divine, resounding among the trees, like a language full of wars and songs. Wind that bears off the dead leaves with a quick raid and deflects the pulsing arrows of the birds. Wind that topples her in a wave without spray and substance without weight and leaning fires. Her mass of kisses breaks and sinks, assailed in the door of summer's wind. Now here again, I'd like to repeat the lines. The clouds travel like white handkerchiefs of goodbye. I mean, it sort of reminds me of what you would read from Meghadutam as well. And the other line being, deflects the pulsing arrows of the birds. Now you could see how he also talks about an orchestra, and an orchestra of the sound of silence, almost as the song goes. And it's so beautiful how he keeps shifting between, embracing that universal quality of love, at the same time falling into the beautiful solitude of love. When he is with her, and also when he also feels, when he also tries to understand who he is when he is with her and also without her. The next one I would like to read talks more about the afternoon context. So the next two actually fit into this. So that's Leaning into the Afternoons and White Bee. So these are poem numbers 7 and 8 of the collection. So leaning into the afternoons. Leaning into the afternoons, I cast my sad nets towards your oceanic eyes. There in the highest blaze, my solitude lengthens and flames, its arms turning like a drowning man's. I send out red signals across your absent eyes that move like the sea near a lighthouse. You keep only darkness, my distant female. From your regard, sometimes the coast of dread emerges. Leaning into the afternoons, I fling my sad nets to that sea that beats on your marine eyes. The birds of night peck at the first stars that flash like my soul when I love you. The night gallops on its shadowy mare, shedding blue tassels over the land. Now, this particular one, just the title of which is basically the first line, leaning into the afternoons, I think that that beautiful gerund, the verb of leaning into the afternoon itself, is so intriguing. And the last two lines of this poem, I want to read that to you and just imagine the beautiful imagery. The night gallops on its shadowy mare. I don't think anyone has ever given us such a picturization of night. Shedding blue tassels over the land. I just love the fact that the tassels of the tail of this so-called, metaphorical horse and the land. Like this is that very beautiful merging of afternoon into a sort of probably an early evening and a late evening, so that there's darkness coming in from one side, and at the same time you can see the silvery bellows of the sea, and you could see a sort of a iridescent blueness that is spread over the shore. And I think he captures that beautifully in this poem. The next one, White Bee, is about a lot of alliterations and personification that happens here. And he also talks about the various native species, the flora and fauna of the Chilean land. And he tries to equate her silence with the sort of the noises of the cicadas and the noises of every other creature that is around them. White Bee, you buzz in my soul, drunk with honey, and your flight winds in slow spirals of smoke. I am the one without hope, the word without echoes, he who lost everything and he who had everything. Last Hausa, in your creeks, my last longing. In my barren land, you are the final rose. Ah, you who are silent, let your deep eyes close. There, the night flutters. Ah, your body a frightened statue naked. You have deep eyes in which the night flails, cool arms of flowers and a lap of rose. Your breasts seem like white snails. A butterfly of shadow has come to sleep on your belly. Ah, you who are silent, here is the solitude from which you are absent. It is raining. The sea wind is hunting stray gulls. The water walks barefoot in the wet streets. From that tree, the leaves complain as though they were sick. White bee, even when you're gone, you buzz in my soul. You live again in time, slender and silent. Are you who are silent? So this one again, I'm going to repeat a few lines which bring out that lovely comparison. So, talking about her body as a frightened statue, and talking about the night flailing with the cool arms of flowers, and the solitude from which now she is absent, so you can slowly see her receding into the background, and the sea wind is hunting stray gulls. So it's almost a sort of a pathetic fallacy in motion, and you can see how he tries to compare the night chasing things as much as he chasing his love. And in the first few lines, when he talks about the creaking of the hawser is like this large cable ships in order to tie up something. And I think the way in which he talks about the sounds, like the sort of imagery that he brings in there, the sort of similes and metaphors that he brings there in order to make that sound heard by us as readers, and probably for the persona that he's addressing to, is just beautifully brought out here. So next I'll move to another poem. This is talking about the twilight zone. I picked this poem because this poem was inspired after he had read the collection of Rabindranath Tagore's The Gardener, which is in itself a beautiful collection, The Caged Bird and the Free Bird. And in that collection, the 30th poem is where he talks about the sky at twilight. And Neruda was quite inspired by this, and he acknowledges this, and here goes the poem. In my sky at twilight, you are like a cloud, and your form and color are the way I love them. You are mine, woman with sweet lips, and in your life my infinite dreams live. The lamp of my soul dyes your feet. That's DYES. My sour wine is sweeter on your lips. O reaper of my evening song, how solitary dreams believe you to be mine. You are mine, mine, I go shouting, and the wind hauls on my widowed voice. Huntress of the depths of my eyes, your plunder stills your nocturnal regard as though it were water. You are taken in the net of my music, my love, and my nets of music are wide as the sky. My soul is born on the shore of your eyes of morning. In your eyes of morning, the land of dreams begins. Now, this is where Pablo Neruda sort of differs from the kind of longing that we talk about, the kind of, probably say breakup lyrics or something like that for a modern context. I think here when he starts to embrace every emotion, whether be it abandonment, and for many reasons where when he had to leave Temuco and go to Santiago to pursue his higher education, he lost that, the shores and the forest that he was quite entwined with. That is the sort of nature that was home to him. And he's a person who lost his mother at a very early age and grew up in the loving kindness of his stepmother, luckily so. But nevertheless, he did not get that sort of a maternal love apart from associate with the Chilean landscape. So as it goes, I'm going to read the last poem of this collection, one before the last actually. So before the Song of Despair comes the 20th poem, Tonight I Can Write. Tonight I can write the saddest lines. Write, for example, the night is starry and the stars are blue and shiver in the distance. The night wind revolves in the sky and sings. Tonight I can write the saddest lines. I loved her, and sometimes she loved me too. Through nights like this one, I held her in my arms. I kissed her again and again under the endless sky. She loved me, sometimes I loved her too. How could one not have loved her great still eyes? Tonight I can write the saddest lines. To think that I do not have her, to feel that I have lost her, to hear the immense night, still more immense without her, and the verse falls to the soul like dew to the pasture. What does it matter that my love could not keep her? The night is starry, and she is not with me. This is all. In the distance, someone is singing. In the distance, my soul is not satisfied that it has lost her. My sight tries to find her as though to bring her closer. My heart looks for her, and she is not with me. The same night whitening the same trees, we of that time are no longer the same. I no longer love her, that's certain, but how I loved her. My voice tried to find the wind to touch her hearing. Another's, she will be as she was before my kisses. Her voice, her bright body, her infinite eyes. I no longer love her, that's certain. But maybe I love her. Love is so short, forgetting is so long. Because through nights like this one, I held her in my arms. My soul is not satisfied that it has lost her. Though this be the last pain that she makes me suffer, and these the last verses that I write for. I just want to repeat a few lines. I no longer love her, that's certain, but maybe I love her. You can see how thoroughly vacillating and confusing that is. But, well, if that's not love, I do not know what else is. But this line which says, love is so short, forgetting is so long. It's just an elongated philosophy of, I think, theory of relativity. And the beautiful way in which he has embraced the landscape, the woman belonging to that landscape, and it's both personal and universal. I mean, when people say that in order for something to be truly universal, it first has to be truly regional and personal. And I think that's what Neruda has done. And I just want to read a few other quotes of Neruda and also about him. Just take a few more minutes. Yeah, so this is what Neruda said about his own poetry. He said, I would want to create poetry corroded as if by an acid, by the toil of the hand, and impregnated with sweat and smoke, smelling of urine and lilies. So this is the poets we have in this collection and the rest. And a very famous Spanish poet, Garcia Lorca, when he introduced Neruda to his contemporaries in Madrid when he had visited there, he said, here is a Chilean diplomat, but more than that, a poet closer to death than to philosophy, a poet closer to pain than to intellect, a poet closer to blood than to ink. Now, when we canonize him today and talk about all of this, we should remember that after winning the Nobel Prize and coming back to the stadium in Santiago, and when he read his poems, there were 70,000 people who stood up and gave him that applause because they understood the words, they understood something that came out of their land. Because 1924 was also the time when Gandhi was fasting here for our nation's independence. There was a lot of struggle in the air. There was a lot of revolution. There was a lot of revolts and protest in the air. We also had all our Western scholars, from T.S. Eliot to all others. This was the time when all your imagism and all kinds of avant-garde movement came about. And every ism was literally about grappling with individuality and finding that individuality. But whereas when that was all about center can't hold and things fall apart, I think Neruda, through his personal experiences, gave that beautiful center for people in order to identify themselves. And I think that's what made me fall in love with Neruda, and also the sort of abounding hope that he gives you when you read his poems, so personal. You feel assured about your own emotions, and I think that's what literature is for, that's what art is for, and that's why we're all here this evening, keeping away all kinds of despair and misery and everything else, because I think we love those two words, books, coffee. So I think those two really mean the world to us. And thank you so much for your patient listening. I hope I've not gobbled up too much of time. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Christina Dhanasekaran, for giving us a wonderful flights of fantasy or fancy, I could call it. And like Keats tells us, getting into the viewless wings of poesy, not charioted by Bacchus and his parts, but in the viewless wings of poesy, he says. I think someone has to mute the volume. Thank you, Professor DC. Yeah, for giving us this wonderful, flights of fancy and fantasy into the world of Pablo Neruda. And we had a huge, wonderful conglomeration of various authors, right? Like from Jahnavi Barua in Assam, or Muhammad Ali from America, or Orhan Pamuk from Turkey. I didn't expect this, variety. And we had, this Chilean diplomat and politician, right? Pablo Neruda, the Nobel laureate of 1971. Again, a politician, a statesman, right? He has given us wonderful poems. And now the final presenter would be Professor Shri Ramamurthy. Again, she is a passionate writer, a poet, but she's not from literature. She's a professor of biotechnology, but still she breathes literature. And so this variety, like the medical doctor, Jahnavi Barua, we have Professor Shri here. And before we conclude, next Friday, again, we have from 6 to 7:30. It might shoot up till 8. That's why we asked there, are you free up till 8? Because these are relaxed evenings for us. And it should be very casual evenings where we can, like Professor DC beautifully pointed out, we can stay away from all the despair, the fever, and the fret of the world and engage ourselves in a beautiful literary sublime of our own choosing. So if any of you is interested in presenting or book reviewing any of your books, please message us or ping us or put your names in the chat column with the title of the book, your phone number. We will contact you and also give us a snap of yours. Next week, we have already 3 participants fixed. Professor Dr. Kunyamad, he is professor and head University of English, Kannur University, a passionate literary soul, right? I'm no exaggerations here, a very passionate literary soul. When I asked him, sir, you can choose one book. You want me to choose one book? I have 12 books right now with me. I am undecided, he said. I was bowled over. So, he's there. Professor Chakravarti, head of the Department of English, GTN College, Dindigul. He'll be another passionate Anita Nair fan, right? He's going to give us a beautiful book from Anita Nair. And interestingly, when Anita Nair was with us at MCC 2016, he was here with Anita Nair. He interacted with her. And he was also telling her how he enjoyed reading her novels, and she was all agog listening to him. So, and another professor is Professor Sharon Christie from Lady Dog College. She'll be giving us a presentation on a very new novel that I haven't seriously heard of. And another presenter would be Miss Bhuvaneshwari. We have 1 or 2 more slots. If any of you is interested, please ping us. Now over to Professor Shri Ramamurthy, a passionate literary soul again. Shri Ramamurthy, over to you.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, Professor Shri, yes.
Thank you, sir. The book I'm about to review is Tuesdays with Morrie, an old man, a young man, and life's greatest lesson. It's written by Mitch Albom.
Shri, there seems to be an echo.
Just 1 minute, sir. Just 1 minute.
Yeah. Before that, if you have any questions for Professor Krishna Dhanasekaran, you can ask her. Any questions for Professor Krishna Dhanasekaran?
Sir,
Yes. Yes.
Hello, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. This is Edwin from Bishop Weber College.
Yes.
Glad to listen to you, ma'am. I would like to know DC ma'am's view on Kalidasa and Neruda. Kalidasa and Neruda's view of love. And I see both are different cultures, but the way he uses language and with all those imageries of nature, can you comment on Kalidasa's and Neruda's idea of love? Do you see more similarities or differences?
Sure. Thank you, Edwin, for that lovely question. I think, as you said, this is going to be a sort of different time periods and very different styles of writing. I was just reminded of Kalidasa when we spoke about the clouds as handkerchiefs, and that's why I brought in the whole Meghdudam analogy. But I think when it comes to Kalidasa's style of writing, the way in which he portrays human relationships there again, it's a very sort of there. But when it comes to Neruda, I think again it's something that the common folk can understand. That's the thing with Neruda. When he talks about the smell of urine and the smell of lilies, I don't think anyone would be able to juxtapose that. Like, we are a little bit jolted when we read that line first. But that's the kind of a poet. Like, he was not just a poet. Like, he was a politician. He was a protest leader as well. So he moved more with the common folk. Even though when we see pictures of him in his full suited piece and standing in front of the microphone, but Neruda was a person who was able to move freely with the crowd. I mean, even during Pinochet's reign and the very controversial death of Neruda, you found people who broke barriers and who did not, respect the curfew and came out to the street, not just clamoring for it, but how much they missed the voice. He was the people's voice. As a poet, he was able to be that. And I think when it comes to Kalidasa's style of writing and everything else, of course, he belongs to a different context altogether, but it becomes a little more highbrow literature when we talk about Kalidasa. He has his own great, wonderful metaphors in his own rights, yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
That answers it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, any other question?
no questions, sir. This is Sharon again. I would just like to say to ma'am that I have also fallen with Pablo Neruda after hearing that impassioned reading, and I simply
Oh,
loved it.
thank you. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, ma'am.
Professor DC, I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
I'm so happy that you have catapulted hearts, right, with your rendition of Pablo Neruda's love poems. Now, what is Pablo Neruda's conception of love? Because love has various definitions, and like you beautifully said, no, various demarc. What is Pablo Neruda's conception of love?
I think it was a lifelong search for it. I'm not very sure whether he found it or not. But as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old one writing a collection like this, when he was quite, it was a sort of a childish lust that he felt for the rustic women folk, the native women folk there. And from there, of course, it went on to more advised and rationalized companionship that he sought, and he married quite a number of times. I think he had 2, 3 partners, wives. And there are also a controversial sort of an episode which he himself confesses in his memoirs, talking about the lust that he had for a maid from Ceylon and how he had probably misbehaved with her, which borders on rape too. So one of the reasons why a lot of feminists have many bones to pick with him now. But I think he was one person who was, basically true to himself. Like he didn't want to hide anything that he would feel about love. And I think Mitch Albom is coming, but there also there'll be this wonderful section on emotions where the teacher Morrie will be talking about. Sorry to steal the thunder, but I think just that one phrase talks about going to that extreme with emotions. Another Kashmiri poet also, Lal Det, says she's a mystic poet a woman poet from the 14th century. She says that in order to be the master of moderation, one has to be slave to extremes. And I think love is a very powerful emotion. And for you to understand love in all its childishness, in its romanticism, in all its nostalgic feel, in all its lustfulness, in all its betrayal, in all its toxicity, because we have a very ideal portrayal of love. That's why he says, I love her, I don't love her, I'm certain I don't love her, I'm certain I love her. Maybe she loved me too. But what we could hold on to are the very strong memories. Whether it was toxic or not, it was love, and he had felt it during that time. And what was felt was the truth that he ascribes to love. And I think that's why he differs from a lot of other expositions on love.
Wonderful. Thank you, Professor DC. That was very convincing. Thank you so much. Now we'll move over to our final presenter of the day. She said she'll just take 10 minutes. So, Professor
Sir, I'm right
Shri.
here.
Yes.
Tuesdays with Morrie, an old man, a young man, and life's greatest lesson. I got unmuted. I mean.
Yes. We can hear you. Yeah.
All right. The importance of sociology. Often, I think that the subject itself is not given its due importance. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can hear you. Professor Shri, we can hear you. Yeah.
See, sociology is very important because, see, for example, you're going in a road, there is another person coming, there is no mistake of yours, but you meet with an accident. Just for example, a hypothetical situation. So he might have some other problem, but he has just ran into you. These problems also become yours now. So sociology is like it deals with marriage, it deals with culture, it deals with raising up children, parenting, everything. So sociology is very important, and Morrie Squats, Professor Morrie Squats is a professor of sociology. And this is a thesis related to death. Morrie Squats contracts a syndrome, asymptomatic, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. Amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is a syndrome. Now, what is a syndrome? Syndrome is when this particular disease takes up each and every part, each and every organ of your body. And finally, this person is going to die. Unlike, there are many ways people approach death. There are a group who contemplate on death, meditate on that. Oh my God, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die. I'm old. I'm in my 70s. I'm gonna die. But this professor takes a different approach. He plans his thesis on that. He tells people what to pack and what not to pack. And there is only one student, and that is the author of this book. That's Mitch Albom. So the acknowledgement says, have you ever had a professor like this? Have you ever had a teacher like this? It's like, he talks about Morrie first, his ailment, and the curriculum of this thesis is the topic of importance is the meaning of life. He says that until you learn to die, you don't know how to live. He talks about a lot of topics like trust. When he was a professor at Brandeis University, USA, he gives an exercise, that a trust exercise. He asked his students to pair up, and then he asked his students to, one of the students to blindfold and then fall flat. There's just one girl who falls flat, and before she falls, there is, her partner who goes and holds her. When you expect someone to trust you, it's important to, have that same trust on the other person as well. That is the base point. That is the point that you have to take away from this exercise. That is what he means. And this book, when you look at it, there are a lot of points being discussed, as in there are a lot of topics being covered, like the fear of aging. There's this, a lot of people invest in this fear of aging. They use this cream and you look young. Use this perfume, you'll look beautiful. You look handsome, all this. But Professor Morrie Squats, he looks at aging as a process of growth. He says that being young is miserable. He says that there is a lot of inadequacy, there is a lot of struggle, and there's a lot of strife. And on top of this, the young people aren't wise. And then he talks about it as a part of growth. Then there are a lot of teaching methodologies and techniques used in this book, as in there is an interaction. He doesn't deliver a lecture, though it's life's greatest lesson. He doesn't deliver a lecture. It's based on interactions. He uses a lot of methodology like skill of probing questions, inquiry-based method. Mitch Albom is asked to come up with his own topics like love, raising a family, raising children, and then ways of expressing love. As in there is no definite template to show love or receive love. Morrie Squat, he says that he talks to Mitch Albom. Mitch Albom's brother is battling cancer, and he doesn't want to receive help at all. He wants to battle it all by himself. And Morrie Squat says that there is no definite template for love. There are ways, and we have to understand this is not business-like, where you negotiate and you want to show the way you love. You want to express it your way. This is not negotiations. This is not a business. It's about accepting things as well. That's what Morrie Squat says. And I look at it as there is a feministic approach as well. As in, though he is dying, his time has been fixed, probably 5 years from the time he contracts the disease. But then he wants his children, he wants his sons and his wife. His wife Charlotte has been a professor. He doesn't want her to quit her job, sit by his side and weep all the time. He wants her to keep going with the routine life. He says that one person's life shouldn't disturb all the people around him. Like, at the same time, he says that family is important, to know that you're grounded, to know that no matter what happens, people are there. It's like, he says that it is important to allow people to go with their routine, to proceed with their routines. At the same time, there are people. And there are different types of people who come ask him like with long letters saying that this disease, my mother got this disease and I'm gonna get it. A beeping letter for around 4 pages. He gives replies for all those letters, and at one point in time he says that, well, I think you found help in grieving. That's what he says. And he talks about money as well. There is one person who, Ted Turner, he says that I don't want this to be written in my tombstone that this person doesn't own a network. It's like a very casual way of putting things. He just says that, Morrie says that, like, seriously, you didn't get anything else to be written on your tombstone? The very casual way, the book goes as a very casual way. And then they also talk about feelings and emotions. It's like a feeling is different and an emotion is different. He talks about this as in, he says, well, you know this is anger. Well, you know this is fear. Allow the expression to take over you. Allow the feeling to take over you. But don't become a victim of that. The second time when you contract the same, you know that, well, this is fear. I know this. This is what is going to happen to me next. You'll be aware of it. So let it pass through. Don't hold back. Don't resist the temptation. Don't just get scared. Don't get threatened. Just allow it to pass through. That's what he says. And he talks about the culture. Morrie has always followed his own culture. He says that if the culture doesn't work for you, well, fine, it's okay. Start your own culture. The culture he sees is, this is addressed by Mitch Albom. Mitch Albom was a person, a sports writer. He writes about a lot of top athletes who really don't care about what he writes. And there are people, as in when you get the tickets, people stamp on you, they don't even acknowledge your presence. That's how things work. And this book was written more than 30 years ago, I guess, and the things haven't changed yet. That's how we people still behave. He says that start your own culture. Don't try to fit in somewhere. Have guts, start your own culture. That's what he says. There's also Ted Koppler. He is a famous person in the US running a TV show. And Professor Morrie, though he's very humble, he's like, he induces humility in Ted Koppler as well. He induces humility in Ted Koppler as well, because he feels that this person sounds narcissistic because he is famous and all. And at the same time, he gives guidance to the people who comes around. He feels more connected to the people who struggle and suffer. He still reads the news, knowing very well that he is not going to be around to watch anything that happens. He still reads the news, and there was a chaos going on in Bosnia at that time. And he literally wept. He means to say that when you know the pain, when you know the kind of emotion, you feel more connected to the people who suffer, and you tend to be more kind. That's what he says. He talks about death as inevitable. We people behave like it's not going to happen to us. We people are ignorant. We know that. We know pretty well that we will die. And at the same time, we are ignorant of that. He says that use this Buddhist philosophy, that small bird that is perching on your shoulder and asking you if that is the day, if today is the day that I'm going to leave, and do what makes you happy. It's not about money. He doesn't say that money is not necessary. He never says that money is not necessary. Materialistic things are not necessary. He doesn't say that. He means to say that there is a difference between surviving and living. Surviving, what people do most of the time is surviving. They just do the immediate task, and we forget what's more important. We have this kind of feeling to gobble up things, to just acquire things. Probably a new car, and fine, okay, I've bought this new car. And then what? Next, an updated version of this. In this process, we keep acquiring things, and then one point in time, we tend to forget about the meaning of life. We tend to become ignorant about the meaning of life. And we aren't going to take anything with us. We are well aware of it, at the same time, ignorant of it. So, he says, next topic, they discuss about fear of aging. The next is great. Next, marriage. Marriage, he talks about marriage as something. There are people who struggle to get into marriage, struggle to get a partner and live with the partner. There is a struggle to get a partner at the first place, and then even if they get a partner, the value system should be common for both of us. The partners should believe in a common system of values. Then the way of communication, as I said before, there is no definite template for love. Then this is not negotiation. It's important to accept the way the other person wants the relationship to be. There should be communication. Communication is different from just telling the message. If the other person doesn't know, or if the other person doesn't understand what is the problem, it's also our problem. It is also our mistake. It is also the mistake of the person who's trying to communicate, because he has failed at it. Marriage, there are people who struggle to get in and get out of marriage, and at the same time, raising children is important. It's when he was asked about marriage, I mean getting children, raising children, he doesn't ask people to do this. Okay, raise children, it's important. No, he doesn't say that. He says that there is no other feeling like raising children. He lets the reader, he lets the listener to make decisions, but he helps in making decisions, and that's what a teacher is supposed to do. He says that, well, the most difficult thing is that children leave. They leave us, we leave them too soon. That's the only thing. But just, he is asking Mitch Albom, just imagine, well, there is no family, no wife, and I don't have a son or someone to take care. I won't be tackling this disease with the same courage. That's what he says. If a person is in his deathbed and there is no child, I mean, there are no children, or there is no one, no partner to take care of, it doesn't feel so good. It feels empty. People might come and go, but the feeling of the support, the security system that we have with the family is something different. And with respect to children, we can't expect this in any other relationship, having a child, because when you raise a child, it's like you take complete responsibility of the child. It's like, it's your responsibility. Parenting styles may differ. Like here, Morrie Squad's parenting style is like, he wants his children, though they are something, want them to be independent. It's like, the next culture that Morrie Squad has started is that he doesn't care to be white. He doesn't care about his privacy. Most of us, if we get a disease like this, if we don't have privacy, if there is someone to wipe our behind, we won't like it, but Morrie Squad is okay with it. And the next thing is forgiveness. Forgiveness, because death is the thing that's to be saddest about. The saddest thing on earth is death, because that doesn't give us time. He talks about a friend, his friend has never helped him when he was facing troubling times, and his friend goes behind Morrie Squad asking for forgiveness, but Morrie Squad refused to forgive him. And finally what happened is that the couple who didn't lend help when Morrie Squad was in trouble, they died. His friend died. His friend and his partner died. So he regrets about it, because then the death didn't give them time. It was important to forgive his friend, but at the same time, he didn't get time. And the next thing is that a meaningful life. Meaningful life, he means to say that surviving is different and living is different. We have to put our spiritual needs first. He says that he doesn't understand spirituality, but he has explained it really well. What is important? To feel connected and devote time to the loved ones around, to the community. What do we do for our community, the people around us? That is what is more important.
Yes, if you can sum it up, Professor Sree. Yeah.
And the graduation ceremony was nothing but a funeral. The funeral of Morrie Squad. That was again on a Tuesday. All the book is named like this because Tuesdays with Morrie, the class, the professor and Mitch Albom, they met on Tuesdays. And the funeral, he died on a Tuesday. The funeral was also on a Tuesday. The graduation ceremony. So this book is just 56 pages if you print it on an A4 sheet. will take about around a couple of hours to finish this. The very first time I read this book was when I was 20, when I was in college. And I don't know, I cried so much when I was reading this. The second time when I read it, I didn't cry. I finished it off earlier. But what happened immediately, this book has an immediate, intense and imprinting effect. It's like the very next day, I stopped fighting over trivial things with my roommates. No bucket fights or anything. This has an effect, as in if you prescribe this book to a couple who is fighting over a breakup or a divorce, definitely they'll learn to communicate, and because it's about death, it's about a more serious thing, not about the trivial things. So they'll learn to communicate, they learn to devote time for each other. So this is all about Tuesdays with Morrie.
Thank you so much, Professor Shri. This was a very insightful book. I have never known about this. Tuesdays with Morrie. It's a memoir, and I'm told this is a talk or an advice given by a professor on his deathbed to his own student. It's surprising. You know, I can connect it, if you want, with Lord Krishna's sage advice to Arjuna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra in the Mahabharata, or Daniel Quinn in Ishmael, you know, where he gives this advice. So, you know, this is a revelation. This is an insightful book. Professor Shri, it's no wonder that you cried, because the way you said it also made us moved. I think we have got a wonderful book. Yeah, wonderful book to take home. What is the best advice that the professor gives the student? One advice, if you can call it, one best advice that we all as professors give our students advice. But what do you think is the best advice in this memoir that he gives a student?
So before I answer this question, I would like to add one more point. It's like every professor or every teacher will feel proud of his or her own subject. This professor also feels proud, and Mitch Albom again, he feels so proud because see, I've studied in a technical university and I've also studied in MCC, and the way I connect with professors in MCC is totally different from the way I connect with professors in Shastra. As in, I take advice from my professors in Shastra. Definitely, yes, I go back to them. There are my most favorite professors over there as well. But I take advice regarding my profession, my career there. But when I take advice from you people, it's different. It's totally different. Yes, I do take advice from you with respect to my career. But I talk to you with respect to my life and what happens each and every day as well sometimes. So, sociology, he says that not many professors write back to not many students write back to their professors in law colleges or medical universities, but the subject, the arts, sociology, English, language, and all this, people go back to their professors. People write back to their professors. Morrie was getting a lot of letters saying that you were the best professor ever. So this is one aspect about literature, arts, and sociology. Though sociology is a pretty complex subject to understand, it might seem simple, but it's not as simple as it seems to be, basically. And
thank you.
The question, sir?
Yes, what is the best advice?
So, with respect to this book, Mitch Albom was a sports writer. He was writing about the players, the athletes and all. He used to refer to Morrie as coach as well. His coach for life. That's how he addressed Morrie. But Mitch Albom wanted to play piano. He wanted to become a musician. He was chasing the wrong things. Morrie's quote says that we have to chase the right things. We chase the wrong things. This is because of the culture again. So he says that if the culture doesn't work out for you, have guts, muster up guts, and start your own culture. Morrie doesn't care about anything. He even talks with his mouth full. Normally we don't do that. We talk about table manners. We talk about how to hold a spoon and a fork. But Morrie doesn't care about anything. He talks to his students and his fellow professors. He talks it. Those are from his heart. He doesn't care about anything else. So he says that we have to chase the right things. Passion. We have to find out our passion.
Thank you so much, Professor Shri. Any questions for Professor Shri? You can unmute yourself and ask her. So thank you, everyone. It's been a wonderful time. Although we overshoot the time limit by a few minutes, that's why we asked a question there. If you are free for the whole night, you can be with us. Some of us have messaged me saying, sir, we'll be happy if it goes on and on throughout the night also. But, we didn't tell you in advance. So we have to call it a day. Thank you so much for being with us. Till next week, the same Friday, sharp at 6. Meet you again next Friday at 6 in the evening with books and coffee. Thank you so much. It was a wonderful time. Thank you. Thank you, one and all.